The gavel hit the podium with a sound like a pistol crack, sealing my fate for exactly $135,000. 800 acres of prime Wyoming high country, rolling hills, pine forests, and a silence so deep you could hear your own heartbeat. To anyone else in that suffocating county courthouse, it looked like the deal of the century. To me, a former Army combat engineer with a blown-out knee and a bank account full of disability back pay, it looked like salvation. I stood there, shaking the bank representative's hand, thinking I had just bought my freedom. I thought the war was finally behind me. I was wrong. 3 hours later, I was standing on the porch of my new life, watching two Black Hawk helicopters scream over the treeline, banking hard and low. Before I could even process the rotor wash kicking up the dust, a convoy of black SUVs tore up my driveway, smashing through the rusted gate like it was made of balsa wood. Men in tactical gear poured out. FBI, DEA, ATF, an entire alphabet soup of federal authority swarming my land with rifles raised. The lead agent, a woman with eyes like flint and a badge that caught the afternoon sun, marched up the steps, pointed a finger at my chest, and dropped the hammer. "Get your hands where I can see them," she barked. "And tell me where she is." That was the moment I realized I hadn't bought a ranch. I had bought a crime scene. Let me back up a bit, so you understand how a guy who just wanted to build furniture and raise a few horses ended up in the middle of a federal siege. My name is Elias Thorne. I spent 12 years in the Army, mostly clearing routes in places where the ground wanted to kill you. When I got out, I was restless. I had a settlement check that felt heavy in my pocket, like blood money, and I needed somewhere quiet to put it. My buddy, Marcus Mac O'Reilly, was the one who found the place. We grew up together, played high school ball together. Mac was a real estate attorney now, a guy who knew the county records better than he knew his own kids. We were at a diner when he slid the listing across the table. "Iron Ridge Ranch," Max said, avoiding my eyes just a little, staring at his coffee. "Bank foreclosure. The previous owner went belly up. Rapid liquidation. Elias, this is it. It's the dream." I should have caught that hesitation. I should have asked why a man who usually looked me in the eye was suddenly fascinated by the sugar packets. But I was blinded by the acreage. 800 acres for under 150 grand? In this economy? It was impossible. The auction was a blur. There were other bidders, sure, a developer from Jackson Hole, a cattleman from the valley, but then there was this one guy, a sharp-dressed man in a charcoal suit, European cut, with eyes that looked dead. He bid aggressively until the price hit 130. Then, he looked at his phone, read a text, turned pale, and walked out of the room without a word. I won the bid. I felt like a king. I drove out to Iron Ridge immediately. The place was majestic, but as I walked the property, the contractor's side of my brain, the side that spent years looking for things that didn't fit, started tripping alarms. First, it was the livestock. There were maybe 40 head of cattle in the east pasture, but they were starving, ribs showing, dull eyes. Someone had just stopped feeding them weeks ago. Then, the infrastructure. The barn was rotting, the siding peeling off in sheets, but mounted on the corners were military-grade surveillance cameras. I'm talking $10,000 thermal optics rigged to a structure that was barely standing. It was like putting a jet engine on a wagon. And finally, the concrete. Behind the equipment shed, there was a fresh slab, maybe 20 by 30 feet. It wasn't a foundation for a building. It wasn't a patio. It was just there, smooth, pristine, and completely out of place in a working cattle yard. I slept on the floor of the main house that first night, my sleeping bag rolled out on the dusty hardwood, my sidearm. A 1911 I've carried since my service, under my pillow. Old habits die hard. When the feds hit the next morning, I didn't panic. Panic gets you killed. I raised my hands, walked off the porch, and met the lead agent. Her name was Special Agent Sarah Vance, FBI. "I bought this place yesterday," I told her, my voice calm over the sound of the idling helicopters. "I have the deed in my truck. If there's a problem, I suggest we lower the weapons and talk." Vance looked at me, assessing. She signaled her team to lower their rifles, but she didn't smile. "You're Elias Thorne?" "That's right." The previous owner, Vance said, checking a tablet, was a woman named Elena Vostok. "We've been building a RICO case against her for 2 years. 6 weeks ago, she vanished. We thought she abandoned the site. Then you showed up." "Elena Vostok?" I asked. "Mac told me it was a bankruptcy. Some guy who couldn't pay his loans." "It was a front, Mr. Thorne," Vance said. gesturing to the property. All of this, the cattle, the ranching, it was a stage set. Vostok is a broker for the Bratva, Russian organized crime. She launders money, massive amounts of it. And we believe the central node of her operation is right under your feet. She walked me to the equipment shed. Her team was already there with hydraulic cutters. They snapped the lock on a heavy steel door I hadn't even noticed, hidden behind a stack of hay bales. The smell hit us first. Not manure or hay, but ozone and hot electronics. We went down a set of stairs. It wasn't a root cellar. It was a bunker. A reinforced, climate-controlled command center buried 20 feet underground. There were server racks humming along the walls, industrial shredders filled with confetti, and a whiteboard covered in transaction codes that looked like hieroglyphics. This, Vance said, sweeping her hand across the room, is where dirty money from Eastern Europe gets turned into clean American real estate. We estimate she moved $300 million through this room in the last 4 years. I stood there, feeling the blood drain from my face. I had spent every dime I had on a money laundering machine. But that's not the worst of it, Vance said. We intercepted chatter. Vostok didn't just leave money behind. She left leverage. Outside, a shout went up. We got something. We ran back up the stairs. The forensics team had brought in a jackhammer and cracked open that weird concrete slab I'd noticed. Buried inside was a waterproof pelican case the size of a coffin. They popped the seals. It wasn't gold. It wasn't drugs. It was cash, stacks of $100 bills, maybe $500,000, and hard drives. 7 military-grade encrypted hard drives. Vance picked one up, her hands gloved. This is it, she whispered. The insurance policy. This is the ledger of every politician, every cartel boss, and every banker she ever worked with. Vostok disappeared because she knew we were close, but she couldn't get these out in time. Suddenly, the situation shifted. The air on the ranch changed from investigation to war zone. Vance turned to me. Mr. Thorne, I need to be honest with you. Vostok knows we're here. But more importantly, she knows you are here. You bought the land. Legally, this is your property. But practically, you are sitting on the most dangerous evidence in the Western Hemisphere. As if on cue, my phone rang. An unknown number. Vance nodded at me. Answer it. Put it on speaker. I tapped the screen. Thorne. The voice on the other end was smooth, accented, and terrifyingly calm. Mr. Thorne, I apologize for the intrusion. My name is Elena. I know who you are, I said. Good. Then we can skip the pleasantries. You have something that belongs to me. Not the land. You can keep the dirt. I want the drives. I am prepared to offer you $500,000, cash, wired to an offshore account of your choosing. You walk away. You let my associates retrieve the package. And you live a very long, very wealthy life. I looked at Vance. She was tracing the call, shaking her head. And if I don't? I asked. Elena laughed softly. I am a businesswoman, Mr. Thorne. I prefer transactions. But I also have a demolition team on retainer. You have 48 hours. After that, the offer expires. And so do you. The line went dead. Vance looked at her team. We have 48 hours. Lock this place down. I want a perimeter established at the tree line. Drones up. Snipers on the ridge. Wait, I said. I looked at the map they had spread out on the hood of a truck. You're setting up a defensive perimeter? Standard protocol, Vance said. We hold the ground until we can extract the data. That's a mistake, I said. The old engineer in me was waking up. You're fighting the terrain. Look at the topography. The North Ridge dominates the approach. If they come, they'll come from the blind side of the creek bed. If you set up a static defense, they'll pick you apart with mortars or long-range fire before they even step foot on the grass. Vance stared at me. And what do you suggest, Sergeant? We don't defend, I said. We invite them in. We create a fatal funnel. I grabbed a marker. We weaken the fence line here, at the gap near the grain silo. We make it look like a security oversight. We reinforce the other sectors so heavily they have to take the path of least resistance. We channel them into the kill zone between the barn and the house. And then, we spring the trap. Vance looked at the map, then at me. A slow smile spread across her face. You want to turn your new ranch into an ambush site. It's already a battlefield, I said. I just want to choose where we fight. The next 40 hours were a blur of preparation. The feds were efficient, but I knew the land. I worked with their tactical teams, moving fencing, setting up trip flares, creating firing lanes. We turned Iron Ridge into a fortress disguised as a farm. But the betrayal hit me around hour 30. Vance pulled me aside, her face grim. "We found the leak," she said. "We know how Vostok knew about the auction." She handed me a file. It was a bank transfer record. $40,000 deposited into an account held by Fletcher Boone, my friend Mac. "He tipped her off," Vance said gently. "She threatened his family, Thorne. She told him she'd hurt his kids if he didn't find a buyer, a patsy, to hold the property while she regrouped. He sold you out." I sat on the porch step, feeling like I'd been kicked in the chest. "Mac, my best friend. He sent me here to die because he was too scared to go to the cops." "Where is he?" I asked. "In custody," Vance said. "He's crying. He's cooperating. But that doesn't change the fact that he put you in the crosshairs." I didn't have time to process the grief. The sun was setting on the second day. The deadline was up. Night fell heavy and dark. The moon was obscured by clouds. We sat in the dark, me in the main house with Vance, tactical teams hidden in the barn, snipers on the roof. At 2 o'clock hours, the thermal cameras picked up movement. "Contact north," the radio crackled. 6 tangos. Moving fast. Professional spacing. They took the bait. They bypassed the heavy patrols on the road and slipped through the weak section of the fence near the creek, exactly where I said they would. They moved like ghosts, wearing night vision, carrying suppressed rifles. This wasn't a street gang. These were mercenaries. Spetsnaz or ex-cartel. They moved into the funnel, the open space between the equipment shed and the house, heading straight for the bunker entrance. "Hold," Vance whispered into her radio. "Hold." The lead mercenary reached the bunker door. He pulled out an electronic breaching tool. "Now," Vance yelled. Floodlights, blinding, stadium-grade LEDs we'd rigged up, slammed on, turning night into day. Federal agents. "Drop your weapons." Chaos erupted. But instead of surrendering, the mercenaries scattered and opened fire. The sound of automatic gunfire shredded the silence. Bullets chewed up the siding of my porch. I was on the floor, glass raining down on me. But then, something went wrong. A shot rang out. Not from the mercenaries, and not from the feds. It was a heavy, thunderous crack from the distant ridge line. One of the FBI agents on the perimeter went down, his leg shattered. "Sniper!" I screamed. "They have Overwatch." Vance was on the radio screaming for suppressive fire, but the sniper on the ridge was pinning them down. He was good. He was hitting the window frames, the door jambs, keeping the federal teams pinned while Vostok's extraction team moved toward the bunker. They weren't trying to win a firefight. They were trying to buy time to blow the bunker. I saw one of them pulling satchel charges out of a pack. "They're going to demo the site," I yelled. "They're destroying the evidence. We can't get a bead on that sniper." Vance shouted back. "He's 600 yards out, masked by the rock face." I looked at the map in my head. I knew that ridge. I had hiked it the first day. There was a deer trail, a washout that cut behind the rock face. It was invisible from the valley floor. "I can flank him," I said, grabbing my vest. "No." Vance grabbed my arm. "You're a civilian. Stay down. I'm a sapper." I yelled back. "And this is my land. If they blow that bunker, this whole investigation is gone. And so is my house. Cover me." I didn't wait for permission. I rolled out the back door into the darkness. I moved fast, adrenaline masking the ache in my bad knee. I circled wide, using the noise of the firefight to mask my movement. I hit the wash and started climbing. My lungs burned, the cold air tasting like copper. I crested the ridge behind the sniper's position. I could see him, a silhouette against the faint starlight, prone, firing rhythmically into the ranch below. Bam! Adjust! Bam! Adjust! He was focused on the FBI. He didn't hear me coming until I kicked a loose stone 10 yards out. He spun around, pulling a sidearm. I didn't hesitate. I rushed him. He fired once, the bullet whizzing past my ear like an angry hornet. I tackled him, slamming him into the shale. We rolled, grappling. He was strong, smelling of sweat and vodka. He got a hand around my throat, squeezing, choking the light out of my eyes. I remembered my training. Violence of action. I jammed my thumb into the pressure point under his jaw, broke his grip, and slammed the butt of my 1911 into his temple. He went limp. I scrambled up, zip-tied his hands with the plastic cuffs I'd grabbed from the command post, and keyed the radio I'd stolen from Vance's table. "Sniper is down." I gasped, breathless. "Ridge is clear. Clear them out." Below me, the tide turned instantly. Without their overwatch, the mercenaries were exposed. The FBI team swarmed them. Flashbangs popped, white light blinding the remaining fighters. Within 60 seconds, it was over. I stood on that ridge, watching the dust settle, watching the red and blue lights of backup units flooding up the driveway, and I finally let myself breathe. The aftermath was a media circus, but a quiet one. The feds kept a lid on the details. Elena Vostok was arrested 3 days later in Panama, trying to board a private jet. The hard drives we saved provided the roadmap to dismantle her entire network. It was the biggest bust in the agency's history for that region. I testified at the trials. Victor Vostok, the team leader on the ground, got 40 years. The sniper, a guy named Sergey who turned out to be an ex-FSB assassin, got life. And Mac? I visited him in a federal holding facility before his sentencing. He looked small in the orange jumpsuit, stripped of his expensive suit and his confidence. I was scared, Elias, he wept. They sent me photos of my kids coming out of school. I didn't know what to do. You should have called me. I told him, the glass partition between us feeling thicker than it was. We dug foxholes together, Mac. You should have called me. I walked out of there and never looked back. He got 3 years. I haven't answered his letters. 6 months later, I was standing on the porch of Iron Ridge. The bunker had been filled in with concrete, sealed forever. The barn was repaired, the cameras taken down. I had a new herd of cattle, healthy ones this time, grazing in the meadow. Agent Vance drove up in a sedan, no sirens this time. She walked up the steps and handed me a check. Witness reward, she said, and compensation for damages. It's $75,000. Plus, the title is clear. The government seized the property from Vostok's Shell Corporation and transferred it to you free and clear. You really own it now. Thanks, Sarah, I said. She leaned against the railing, looking out at the view. You know, you could have been killed up on that ridge. It was reckless. It was necessary, I said. Maybe, she smiled. But you're a hell of a soldier, Elias. If you ever get bored of ranching. I'm done with wars, I said. I think I'll stick to cows. She left, and I watched the dust settle on the road. I learned a lot that week. I learned that deals that seem too good to be true usually are. I learned that even your oldest friends have breaking points. But mostly, I learned that ownership isn't just a piece of paper you sign at a courthouse. It's what you're willing to bleed for. I still walk the perimeter every night. I check the fences. I watch the tree line. It's peaceful now, silent except for the wind in the pines and the lowing of the cattle. But I keep my 1911 in the nightstand, and I keep the gate locked. Because peace is great. But being ready? That's what keeps you free. So, let me ask you guys something. If you found a bunker full of dirty money under your garage, be honest, would you call the cops, or would you grab a shovel and start digging? And how much would it take for you to sell out your best friend? Let me know in the comments. I'm really curious where you draw the line. Thanks for listening, and stay safe out there.